How did a land without great rivers, without a coastline on the world's busiest seas, without a single name most people could place on a map, become the hidden foundation of nearly everything we believe, everything we build, and nearly every word we use for the divine? This is the story of Iran. Not the Iran of headlines, not the Iran of the last 50 years, but the Iran that existed for 5,000 years before any of that. A land where the oldest fire still burns, where the word paradise was first spoken, where a king freed an entire people and left no monument to himself, but a small stone house on a quiet plain. A place where time does not move in a straight line, but spirals, doubling back on itself, so that the ancient and the living are never truly separate. So if you are not in a hurry, stay with us. Because what this land holds, what it gave the world without the world ever knowing, is one of the greatest untold stories in all of human history. To understand Iran, you must first understand the body it was given, its bones, its breath. Because here, more than almost anywhere on Earth, the land shaped everything that followed. The Iranian plateau stretches across an area of roughly 3.7 million square kilometers. Not a single flat expanse, but an enormous geological amphitheater, mountains rising on every side, deserts burning at the center, narrow valleys green with life, tucked between ridges that seem to go on forever. Most of Iran sits above 460 meters. A sixth of it rises beyond nearly 2,000 meters. This is a land built upward, a land that reaches. To the west, the Zagros Mountains run 1,600 kilometers from the northwest toward the Persian Gulf. Peaks pushing above 4,000 meters, range after parallel range, separated by deep river-carved gorges and sheltered valleys of startling fertility. This is where agriculture was born on the Iranian plateau 11,000 years ago, in the foothills where the mountains ease into the eastern edge of the Fertile Crescent. The wild ancestors of wheat, barley, almonds, pistachios, pomegranates, and the grapevine all grew here, waiting to be understood. Persian leopards still hunt these slopes. Wild ibex navigate cliffs that would stop any human. Syrian brown bears move through the oak forests in the high elevations. And every spring, as they have for longer than recorded history, the great nomadic peoples of Iran, the Bakhtiari, the Qashqai, the Kurds, move their herds upward toward the summer pastures, a migration unchanged in its rhythm since before the first cities were built. When you watch those processions crossing the mountain passes, you are watching something that connects directly to the very beginning of human civilization on this plateau. But the mountains are only one face of this land. There is another face entirely. The Dasht-e-Lut, the desert of emptiness. A vast depression in the southeast where the earth itself seems to have been pushed past its own limits. Wind has spent millions of years carving it into a landscape of monuments, ridges of hardened clay, rising 155 meters from the ground, stretching in formations visible from space. Sand dunes in the southeast reach nearly 480 meters in height, among the tallest dunes on Earth. And the heat. In 2005, NASA satellites recorded a surface temperature of 70.7 degrees Celsius in the Lut, the hottest land surface temperature ever measured anywhere on our planet. A later study placed it even higher. Nothing lives in the central Lut, Nothing grows there, nothing passes through, and yet civilization rose around its edges, because the people of this plateau had found a solution so elegant, so quiet, that it still feeds tens of thousands of people today. Achaemenid is a tunnel, bored through rock and earth from the foot of a mountain aquifer to a distant settlement, carrying water by gravity alone, sloping so gently across distances of up to 65 kilometers that the water arrives at its destination still cool and clean, invisible from above. No pump, no power, no noise. The oldest functioning Khanate in Iran, the Khanate of Gonabad, was built sometime between 700 and 500 before the Common Era. It is 2,700 years old. Its main well descends more than 360 meters, and it still provides water to approximately 40,000 people living in the Khorasan Desert today. Iran once had nearly 70,000 functioning Khanates. This technology crossed the Silk Road into North Africa, Arabia, China, and Spain. 37 countries still use it. Iran holds 60% of all the world's Khanates. 11 of them were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2016, not as relics, but as living infrastructure. This is what the desert demanded, and this is the genius the desert produced. High above all of this, rising from the northern rim of the plateau, where the Alborz Mountains form a wall between the hot interior and the cool Caspian Sea, stands Mount Damavand, 5,671 meters, the highest volcano in Asia. A nearly perfect cone of black rock and eternal snow, visible from 250 kilometers away on clear days. To Iranians, Damavand is not simply a mountain. It is where the tyrant Zahak, a monstrous king with serpents growing from his shoulders, was finally defeated and chained deep in the rock, his rage still shaking the earth. When the mountain rumbles, the old stories say it is Zahak, trying to break free. Every mountain here has a story. Every desert has a memory. And every valley, it turns out, holds the bones of something extraordinary. When most people think of ancient civilization, they reach for the same names: Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, the familiar monuments, the familiar textbooks. But 3,000 years before Alexander, 2,000 years before the Persian Empire, the Iranian plateau was already home to one of the most sophisticated cultures on Earth, a civilization most of the world has never heard of, a civilization that built ziggurats to rival Babylon, developed writing systems we still cannot fully read, and traded its craftsmanship from Syria to Uzbekistan, from the Persian Gulf to the ancient cities of Mesopotamia. A civilization that was quietly shaping the world while the world looked elsewhere. Susa, a city founded around 4,200 years before the Common Era in southwestern Iran, in a region ancient peoples called Elam. A city so old it contains 27 layers of superimposed urban settlement, one civilization built on top of the ruins of the last, reaching down into the earth across nearly 6,000 years of continuous habitation. UNESCO inscribed it as a World Heritage Site in 2015. Standing at Susa today, looking out over the low mounds of baked earth, you are standing above more accumulated human history than almost any place on Earth. Elam was not a footnote to Mesopotamia. It was its equal, and sometimes its master. The Elamites had their own language, a complete isolate with no known relatives on the planet, unconnected to any other tongue before or since. They had two distinct writing systems. One of them, Proto-Elamite, comprising 400 to 800 signs across approximately 1,600 clay tablets, remains largely undeciphered to this day. It is the last major undeciphered writing system from the ancient Near East, a civilization still keeping its own secrets. The Elamites practiced a form of succession passed through women. They plundered Mesopotamia in its moments of weakness and dragged its greatest monuments home as trophies. The Code of Hammurabi, which students are taught, was found in Babylon where it was made, was actually discovered in Susa. The Elamites had carried it there after conquest, along with the victory stele of Naram Sin and other wonders of the ancient world. Their treasure houses held the glory of civilizations that history credits to others. 30 kilometers southeast of Susa, rising from the flat scrubland of the Khuzestan plain in the full weight of the desert heat, stands the greatest monument Elam ever built, Chogha Zanbil, a ziggurat constructed around 1250 before the Common Era by the Elamite king Untash-Napirisha, the first Iranian site ever inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Stand before it, and the scale requires a moment to absorb. The original square base measured 105 meters on each side. The structure originally rose over 5 stories to a height of approximately 53 meters. 3 of those 5 stories survive today at nearly 25 meters, not because the structure was poorly built, but because the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal destroyed it around 640 before the Common Era, and the desert then swallowed it whole. It was discovered in 1935 by an oil company geologist who found a stamped brick during petroleum exploration. The city had been buried and forgotten for more than 2,000 years. Every 11th row of the outer bricks carries a cuneiform inscription: I, Untash-Napirisha, king of Anshan and Susa, constructed the holy city. 5,257 inscribed bricks were found at the site. The complex covered 96 hectares and contained temples to more than 22 deities, subterranean royal tombs, and a water treatment system, among the oldest ever identified. And scattered around the base, exactly where they were set down the last day work was done, thousands of unused bricks still lie waiting. The king died. The workers left, and the bricks never moved again. But Elam and Susa were not the only civilizations flourishing on this plateau in the ancient world. Far to the south, in the desert of what is now Kerman province, something was buried so completely that it waited until the 21st century to speak. In 2001, flash floods along the Halil River stripped away thousands of years of soil from ancient tombs no one knew existed. Impoverished villagers swarmed the riverbanks, pulling 5,000-year-old artifacts from the earth: chlorite vases, carved statuettes, vessels covered in scorpion men and eagles and bull men, showing imagery strikingly similar to the art of ancient Mesopotamia. Professional excavations began in 2002. What they found rewrote the map of early civilization. Jiroft, a city of the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, its artifacts traded across a network stretching from Syria to Uzbekistan, from Mesopotamia to the islands of the Persian Gulf. The French archaeologist Jean Perrault visited the site in 2003 and declared, "We must now consider Jiroft as the birthplace of civilizations." Some scholars believe it may be the legendary Aratta, the wealthy kingdom described in Sumerian epic poetry as lying beyond Susa and 7 mountain ranges, so remarkable that even the Sumerians sang of it with reverence and longing. It waited 4,000 years in the ground before anyone was listening. And then there is the city with the most haunting name of all, Shahre Sukte, the burnt city. A settlement on the edge of a vast, now dry lake basin in what is now Sistan-Baluchistan province, founded around 3,200 before the Common Era. One of the largest cities in the world during the 3rd millennium BCE, covering 151 hectares. It burned down 3 times during its history. Over 25,000 graves have been excavated from its soil. More than 2 million artifacts recovered. What they found here shattered assumptions about what the ancient world was capable of. An earthen goblet bearing 5 sequential images of a Persian ibex leaping toward a tree. When the images are spun in sequence, the ibex moves. It is the world's oldest known animation, created 5,100 years ago, 2,000 years before any other moving image we have ever found. The world's oldest artificial eye, a hemisphere of bitumen paste covered in gold, still fitted in the eye socket of a woman who stood 1.8, 2 meters tall, extraordinarily tall for her era, buried with this golden eye she had worn in life. Thousands of years later, surgeons at a conference in London looked at it and said the craftsmanship was equal to anything they could produce. The world's oldest backgammon set, evidence of brain surgery performed on a 13-year-old girl, a precision ruler accurate to 0.5 millimeter, and no evidence of kings, no weapons caches, no palace compounds. Some researchers describe the burnt city as a civilization built to live, not to rule. It flourished for 900 years. Then, around 2,300 before the Common Era, it was abandoned. The lake dried, the trade routes shifted, the people went somewhere else, and the desert covered everything they had built and everything they had dreamed for 5,000 years. Somewhere on the Iranian plateau, between 3,500 and 3,000 years ago, a young priest stood at the edge of a river at dawn, drawing water for a sacred ritual, and saw something that changed the world. A shining being appeared before him, led him into the presence of a supreme God, spoke to him of a truth so ancient, so vast, that the priest spent the rest of his life trying to set it into words. His name was Zarathustra, and what he received that morning at the river's edge became the foundation of the world's oldest prophetic religion, a faith whose ideas would flow into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam so completely that most of the concepts believers in those traditions consider the very core of their faith were in fact articulated first by a man standing on the Iranian plateau more than 1,000 years before Christ was born. Zarathustra's teaching was radical. He did not add a new god to an existing pantheon. He declared there was one supreme god, Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, and that the universe was the arena of a cosmic struggle between truth and the lie, between light and darkness, and that every human being, through every thought, every word, every deed, was choosing a side. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds, the simplest possible formulation of an ethical life. He spent his first 10 years converting one person, his own cousin. Then he won over a king, and from there, the faith spread across the plateau and into the fabric of civilization itself. What Zarathustra taught about life after death was unlike anything in the religious world of his time. After death, he said, "The soul crosses the Chinvat bridge. 2 four-eyed dogs stand guard. 3 divinities assess the balance of your life. For the righteous, the bridge is wide and leads to the house of song, what we now call paradise. For the wicked, the bridge narrows to a razor's edge, and they fall. For those whose good and evil stand equal, there is a waiting place between worlds, a purgatory, 3,000 years old. The end of all things, in Zoroastrian belief, comes through a savior figure called the Saoshyant, born of a virgin, impregnated by the miraculously preserved seed of Zarathustra himself. This savior will raise the dead. All humanity will wade through a river of molten metal. The righteous will feel it as warm milk. The wicked will be purified. Darkness will be annihilated forever, and all creation will be reunited with Ahura Mazda in eternal perfection. Consider what is being described: a virgin birth, a resurrection of the dead, a final judgment, a cosmic battle between good and evil, a savior who defeats darkness forever, heaven, hell, purgatory, angels, and a personal devil. These ideas did not emerge separately in the 3 Abrahamic faiths. They entered world religious thought through Iran, through Persia, through the Iranian plateau. The mechanism was not mysterious. In 586 before the Common Era, Babylon conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and carried the Jewish people into exile. In 539 before the Common Era, Cyrus the Great, a Persian king, conquered Babylon and freed the Jews. For approximately 200 years after that, Jewish communities lived under Achaemenid Persian rule, in direct contact with Zoroastrian civilization. Before the Babylonian exile, the Hebrew Bible contains no personified devil, no hierarchy of angels, no developed concept of heaven and hell, no bodily resurrection, no final judgment, no messianic savior figure. All of these emerge in Jewish thought during and after the Persian period. The scholar Mary Boyce, one of the foremost authorities on Zoroastrianism in the 20th century, wrote that Zarathustra was the first to teach the doctrines of an individual judgment, heaven and hell, the future resurrection of the body, the general last judgment, and life everlasting for the reunited soul and body. These doctrines, she wrote, became familiar articles of faith to much of mankind through borrowing by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And then there is this detail, which stops you cold. The 3 wise men of the Christian nativity story, the Magi who travel to witness the birth of Jesus. The word magi is not a general term for wisdom. It is the Greek word for a specific thing: Zoroastrian priests. Priest astronomers of the Iranian plateau, trained in the sacred traditions of Zarathustra's faith. The word we now use for magic, and the whole concept behind it, derives from these Iranian religious specialists. At the birth of Christianity, Zoroastrian priests from Iran were already in the room. In the ancient desert city of Yazd in central Iran, a city of wind towers and mud brick alleyways that UNESCO inscribed as a World Heritage Site in 2017, there is a fire temple called the Atash, Behram. Behind amber-tinted glass, inside this building, there is a flame burning in a bronze vessel. It has been burning without interruption since approximately 470 of the Common Era, over 1,550 years. It was lit during the Sassanid Empire. It survived the Arab conquest, the centuries of Islamic rule, was moved from temple to temple across 15 centuries, tended by Zoroastrian priests using dry apricot and almond wood, never permitted to go out. Today, perhaps 100,000 to 200,000 Zoroastrians remain in the world, most in India and Iran, descendants of a faith that once shaped the spiritual imagination of half of humanity. In the desert city, in the amber light, the fire still burns. It burned before Islam, before Christianity, before Rome, before the first Jewish temple was destroyed. In Yazd, the fire is older than almost everything you have ever been told is ancient. In 550 before the Common Era, a king from the small region of Anshan in the mountains of southwestern Iran began a campaign of conquest that would, within 30 years, produce the largest empire the world had ever seen. His name was Cyrus, and he was not what empires usually produce. He defeated the Median Empire. He conquered the fabulously wealthy kingdom of Lydia, home of the legendary King Croesus, whose gold had made him a symbol of unimaginable riches. And then, in 539, he turned toward Babylon, the greatest city in the world, surrounded by walls so wide that 4 horses abreast could be turned around on top of them, a city of 100,000 people, of hanging gardens and immense temple complexes. Cyrus took it virtually without battle. On the 12th of October, 539 before the Common Era, his forces entered Babylon peacefully. 17 days later, Cyrus himself rode in to triumphal welcome. Green branches spread before him. And what he did next was unprecedented in the entire history of conquest. He freed the peoples Babylon had enslaved or displaced. He allowed deported populations to return to their homelands. He restored temples that had been closed. He respected the religious practices of the peoples he now ruled. And he freed the Jews. The Hebrew Bible calls him the Anointed One, the only non-Jew in all of Scripture to receive this title, the same word used for the Jewish Messiah. The book of Ezra records his decree allowing the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. He recorded his policies on a clay cylinder, 22.5 centimeters long, inscribed in 45 lines of Akkadian cuneiform. We call it the Cyrus cylinder. Discovered in 1879 during British Museum excavations at Babylon, it now sits in room 52 of that museum. A replica stands in the United Nations building in New York City, translated into all 6 official UN languages. This object predates the Magna Carta, the document often called the origin of human rights in Western tradition, by 1,754 years. And the empire Cyrus built, refined by his successors Cambyses, Darius, and Xerxes, became the first political entity in history to rule peoples on 3 continents simultaneously: Asia, Africa, and Europe. At its height, it governed approximately 49.4 million people, out of the world's estimated 112 million at the time. Nearly half the human race living under a single empire. The Guinness Book of World Records cites this as the highest proportion of the world's population ever ruled by a single empire in history. To stand in the place Cyrus chose for his capital is to understand something about what he believed an empire should be. Pasargadae, a plain at 2,000 meters elevation in the mountains of Fars province, 90 kilometers northeast of modern Shiraz. Not a fortress of intimidating walls. Not a city built to overwhelm, a loose collection of palaces and open spaces spread across an immense natural amphitheater, with, at its center, a garden, the first formal garden in recorded history. Geometric channels carried water across a landscape divided into 4 quadrants, flowing between paths and pools and flowering plants, shaded by trees brought from across the known world. The old Persian word for this walled-around garden was peridesa. The Greeks borrowed it as paradisos, the Romans as paradisus, and from there it entered English. The word paradise comes from a Persian garden built 2,500 years ago on a high plain in Iran. Every time any tradition speaks of paradise, every garden inspired by that vision, from the Mughal gardens of India to the cloisters of medieval Europe to the Persian carpet designs still woven today, all of them reach back, however unknowingly, to Pasargadae. And here, at the edge of that same plain, alone without ornament, stands the tomb of Cyrus. 6 broad steps of white limestone, supporting a small rectangular chamber with a gabled roof. The chamber itself barely 3 meters long, 2 meters wide, 2 meters high. An entrance barely wide enough for 1 person. Nothing else. No army of carved servants, no towering columns, no declaration of conquest. The founder of the world's largest empire chose this, a small stone house on a quiet plain under an immense sky. When Alexander the Great arrived at Pasargadae after burning Persepolis, he found it intact. According to the Greek historian Strabo, an inscription above the door read, "O man, whoever you are, I am Cyrus, who acquired the empire for the Persians and was king of Asia. Grudge me not my monument." No trace of that inscription survives today. There is only the stone, the plain, the silence, and the wind, as it has always blown, moving through the grass of the Murgab plain, over the grave of the man who freed more people than any ruler before him. Cyrus created the empire. Darius built it a home worthy of what it was. Around 518 before the Common Era, Darius I chose a site at the foot of the Mountain of Mercy in the Marv-dashed plain of Fars province and began to build. What rose from that plain over the following decades is still there, ruined, burned, looted, but still there. Still so vast, so precisely carved, so filled with the evidence of every nation that ever passed through it, that standing among its columns you feel not loss, but the shadow of something almost incomprehensible in its ambition. Persepolis, a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1979, the terrace alone, an immense platform rising 20 meters above the plain, covers an area equivalent to 2 football fields. The grand staircase climbing to the main gate was designed so wide and each step so shallow that royalty could ascend on horseback. The Gate of All Nations, built by Xerxes, stands at the entrance, flanked by gigantic, human-headed winged bulls carved from single blocks of stone. Its inscription reads, in 3 languages, that it was made for all nations, not the conquerors, all nations. Inside, the great audience hall contained 72 columns, each between 19 and 24 meters high, and yet only 1.6 meters in diameter. Astonishingly, impossibly slender. 14 still stand today. Their capitals, twin-headed bulls and eagles and lions, carved with a confidence and precision that speaks of a people entirely certain of what they were building. The walls were not the pale grey stone we see now. They were painted in deep blues, reds, yellows, and greens. The whole terrace was alive with color, with incense, with the sound of 23 delegations arriving from across the empire, each identifiable by its clothing and hairstyle and gifts. Babylonians with bulls, Armenians with horses, Indians with gold dust, Ethiopians with ivory and exotic animals. Every subject people, represented in relief on the Apadana staircase with such care and specificity that modern scholars can identify most of the 23 nationalities simply by looking at what they wear. This was not a monument to conquest. It was a monument to the idea that an empire could be made of its differences rather than crushed by them. The administrative records found at Persepolis reveal something remarkable about how this empire was actually built. The workers who constructed it were not slaves. They were paid, wages in silver and food rations. And women workers, in some documented cases, received equal or higher rations than men for the same work. 2,500 years ago, on the construction site of the world's most powerful empire's ceremonial capital, women were in some cases paid the same as men. Darius was not only a builder, he organized the empire into approximately 23 provinces, each monitored by intelligence agents traveling its roads. He introduced the gold. Daric, the first truly international currency, recognizable from Egypt to India. He dug a canal connecting the Nile River to the Red Sea, a precursor to the Suez Canal, wide enough for 2 warships to pass with oars extended. And he built the Royal Road, 2,700 kilometers of maintained road from the capital of Susa to the Aegean city of Sardis, with 111 relay stations, each a day's ride apart, stocked with fresh horses and rested riders. Ordinary travelers took 90 days to cover this distance on foot. The Persian royal couriers, changing horses at every station, covered it in 7 to 9 days. The Greek historian Herodotus observed this system and wrote in something approaching awe, "There is nothing mortal which accomplishes a course more swiftly than these messengers. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor darkness of night prevents them from accomplishing each one the task proposed to him." A version of that sentence, adapted into English, is carved above the entrance of the main post office building in New York City. It serves today as the unofficial motto of the United States Postal Service. The motto of the American postal system is a description of Persian couriers from 2,400 years ago. Near Persepolis, cut high into the face of a cliff, are 4 cruciform tombs carved into rock at impossible height. Darius I, Xerxes I, Artaxerxes I, Darius II. 4 kings of the world's largest empire, their tombs facing each other across a sacred space, each upper panel showing the king before a fire altar with the Faravaha, the winged divine symbol of Zoroastrian faith, hovering above. And below the Achaemenid tombs, cut into the same cliff centuries later, the Sassanid kings left their own messages in stone, a continuous conversation across 700 years, conducted in carved rock high above the plain. One of those reliefs shows something the Roman world never forgot. Alexander burned Persepolis in 330 before the Common Era, looting the treasury with a caravan reportedly requiring 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels. He left the Achaemenid Empire in fragments. Then, after a century and a half of Macedonian successor states, the Parthians, a semi-nomadic Iranian people from the northeastern plateau, slowly reclaimed it all. The Parthians fought Rome to a standstill for 300 years, and at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 before the Common Era. The Parthian general Surena, barely 30 years old, commanding 10,000 cavalry, annihilated a Roman force of 43,000 under the wealthy triumvir Crassus. 20,000 Romans killed, 10,000 captured. Crassus himself killed during negotiations. Legend says the Parthians poured molten gold into his mouth, a reminder that the richest man in Rome had come to Iran seeking more wealth and found only his end. The Parthians shot, mounted archers shooting backward at full gallop while, appearing to retreat, was so famous across the ancient world that a form of the phrase still lives in English today, what we now call a parting shot. But it was the Sassanids who followed the Parthians who created what many historians consider the true golden age of Iranian civilization. On the 28th of April, 224 of the Common Era, Ardashir I, a king from the same province of Fars that had produced Cyrus the Great, defeated the last Parthian king and declared himself King of Kings. His vision was explicit. He saw himself as the restorer of Achaemenid glory, the continuation of a line that had once ruled nearly half of humanity. His circular city of Gur, now Firuzabad, was built as a perfect circle nearly 2 kilometers in diameter, geometric and exact, visible from space, inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2018. His palace beside a spring-fed pool contains the earliest known architectural squinch, a triangular support allowing a dome to be built over a square room. This single innovation, developed in Sassanid Iran, became foundational to all Islamic architecture and eventually spread into European construction as well. It was Ardashir's son Shapur who gave the empire its most extraordinary moment. In 260 of the Common Era, at the Battle of Edessa, the Sassanid king Shapur I captured the Roman Emperor Valerian alive. In all of Roman history, 7 centuries of empire, no Roman emperor had ever been taken prisoner in battle. Not once. Valerian was the first and the last. Shapur had already killed one Roman emperor and forced another to pay a tribute of 500,000 gold coins. Now he stood with a third emperor in chains. He had the moment carved in stone, at the same sacred cliff of Nakshi Rostam, where the Achaemenid kings lay in their high tombs. A relief approximately 7 meters wide, the king on horseback grasping Valerian's wrist, Philip the Arab kneeling, Gordian, 3 crushed beneath the horse's hooves, 3 Roman emperors, 1 composition, 1 cliff, 1 Iranian king. It stands there still, carved into the rock, unweathered after 1,760 years. The Sassanid Empire was not only war. At Ctesiphon, the capital on the Tigris River, 35 kilometers southeast of modern Baghdad, the greatest building of the Sassanid world, still stands in partial ruin today. Tak Kasra. Its arch rises approximately 37 meters, with a span of roughly 25 meters, the largest single-span vault of unreinforced brickwork from the ancient world, built without wooden scaffolding, bricks laid at an angle using fast-drying gypsum mortar, a technique of genius. 1/3 of its facade has been lost to flooding over the centuries. 2/3 still stand alone in the Iraqi desert after 1,700 years. Inside the palace hung the spring of Khosrow carpet, possibly the most costly carpet ever made. Approximately 27 meters by 27 meters, woven in silk with gold and silver thread and precious stones, depicting a paradise garden with water represented by crystals, soil by gold thread, fruits by colored gems on stalks of gold. When Arab forces captured Ctesiphon in 637 of the Common Era, they cut this carpet into fragments and distributed the pieces as war booty. The most beautiful object in the world was divided and scattered and lost forever. Shapur I also founded the Academy of Gondishapur in Khuzestan around 271 of the Common Era. Under the great Sassanid king Khosrow I, who reigned from 531 to 579, and whom Arab historians would later call the most just king who ever lived, this academy became what the scholar George Sarton called the greatest intellectual center of the ancient world. When Emperor Justinian closed the Academy of Athens in 529 and expelled its philosophers, Khosrow gave them asylum. They came to Gondishapur. Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, Persian astronomy, and Syrian medicine all flowed into the same rooms, discussed by the same faculty, recorded in the same library. The Academy maintained the world's first teaching hospital, where students observed patients under faculty supervision, graduates passed licensing examinations, and 24-hour care was provided with medical records kept. The library reportedly held 400,000 books. The University of Oxford was established around 1100 of the Common Era. Gondishapur was already 800 years old. The Sassanid kings gave the world chess as we know it, adopted from India and refined in Persia, the words Shah and Shah Mat. King and king is helpless, entering the game and eventually becoming check and checkmate in English. The word Rook, the castle piece, comes directly from the Persian word Rook. They gave the world polo. Chogan, the sport of kings, played at the Sassanid court and spread from Iran to India to Britain, and from Britain to the rest of the world, inscribed on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage List in 2017. And they gave the world the Iwan, the open vaulted hall that became the defining architectural feature of every mosque, every Mughal palace, every Persian garden pavilion that followed. From the Sassanid court to the Umayyad Caliphate to the Ottoman palace, the Iwan traveled across centuries, carrying with it the memory of what Iranian builders first understood about space and light and the way a human being feels when they step from the open sun into a vast sheltered arch. If geography is fate, then Iran's fate was to stand at the center of everything. The Silk Road, the approximately 8,000-kilometer network of routes connecting China to the Mediterranean, the greatest engine of cultural exchange in the ancient world, didn't bypass Iran. It ran through it, through its mountain passes, across its plateau, through its great cities. Every caravan moving between east and west passed through Iranian markets, through Iranian caravanserais. A caravanserai was not simply an inn. It was an institution, a fortified compound built at the junction of major routes, spaced roughly 20 to 25 miles apart, one day's journey by loaded camel. Within its walls, stables, rooms for merchants of every nationality, cisterns, baths, sometimes a mosque or fire temple. A place where a Chinese silk merchant and an Egyptian spice trader and a Roman gold buyer might sleep under the same roof and conduct business that changed both their worlds. Iran has more than 200 surviving caravanserais. 54 of them were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in September 2023, the largest single batch of Iranian cultural sites ever inscribed at once. Along these roads traveled not just silk and spice and gold. Buddhism spread from India into Central Asia and China through Iranian merchant communities. Zoroastrian ideas traveled westward long before the Persian armies. The road did not merely connect civilizations, it made civilization what it is. And for 2,000 years, Iran was the road. The Arab armies that swept out of the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century of the Common Era were not simply conquerors. They were the inheritors of an astonishing civilizational tradition that in many ways they absorbed more thoroughly than they destroyed. The last Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, fled eastward as his armies fell one by one. In 651, in the city of Merv in what is now Turkmenistan, he was murdered not by an Arab sword, but by a local miller who wanted his royal clothing. The greatest empire of the ancient Near East ended not with a final battle, but with a king stripped of everything, killed by a stranger in a distant mill. But the culture did not end with the king. Within 2 centuries of the Arab conquest, Persian had reasserted itself as the language of Islamic court culture, Islamic poetry, Islamic bureaucracy. The Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad adopted Sassanid court ritual almost wholesale. The Iwan, the dome, the garden, the caravanserai, all Iranian innovations, became the defining elements of Islamic civilization across 3 continents. And then there was the poet. Between 977 and 1010 of the Common Era, a poet named Ferdowsi sat in Tus in northeastern Iran and composed the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, approximately 60,000 verses, the longest epic poem ever written by a single author. 35 years of work in pure classical Persian, purged of Arabic loanwords, preserving the myths, the histories, the heroes, the kings, the entire memory of Iran from the age of creation to the fall of the Sassanid Empire. He gave his people their memory back. An Egyptian scholar was once asked why Egyptians had lost their pharaonic language while Iranians kept theirs. The answer: because we had no Ferdowsi. His tomb in Tus was modeled on the tomb of Cyrus. It bears a Faravahar above the entrance. A medieval Islamic poet, buried beneath the symbol of the pre-Islamic faith his words had helped preserve. The continuity is undeniable. The identity is unbroken. Today, over 300 million people celebrate Nowruz on the spring equinox, the Persian New Year, a tradition 3,000 years old, inscribed on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage List in 2009. On the eve before Nowruz, people leap over bonfires chanting, "Give me your redness, take my paleness," a Zoroastrian fire ritual surviving unchanged into the 21st century. At Pasargadae, on what Iranians call Cyrus Day, the 29th of October, people gather at the tomb of Cyrus the Great in numbers that sometimes surprise the authorities. Not a state ceremony, not a religious obligation, simply people who feel, bone deep, that this matters, that this is part of who they are. Young Iranians wear the Faravahar as jewelry and as tattoos. In a country where the pre-Islamic past is officially complicated by the present, people find ways to carry it in their bodies, in their celebrations, in the names they choose for their children. Damavand, Cyrus, Darius, Persepolis. These are not museum names. They are the names of living people, walking through Tehran's traffic and Shiraz's bazaars and Isfahan's ancient squares. The Asiatic cheetah, an animal that once ranged from Arabia to India, now survives only in Iran. As of the most recent surveys, approximately 17 individuals remain alive. 52% of cheetah deaths are caused by road collisions. The animal that was once the emblem of Sassanid royalty, depicted in their art and kept in their courts, now navigates a landscape of highways on the edge of extinction. The Persian leopard, the largest leopard subspecies in the world, holds on in the Zagros and Olborz ranges. Lake Urmia, once the largest lake in the Middle East, home to flamingos and over 200 species of birds, has lost more than 90% of its volume since 1995. The ancient qanats that watered Persian civilization are drying up, abandoned for modern pumps that drain the aquifers they once delicately sustained. The land that made everything possible is under the pressures all ancient landscapes now face. But the mountains still stand. The Lut still burns. The Zagros oaks still hold the slope against the wind. And in Yazd, on a quiet street in the old city, behind a facade modeled on Achaemenid architecture, behind amber glass, a flame still burns in its bronze vessel, as it has burned for 1,550 years. There is a country the world thinks it knows. It does not know it. It does not know about the woman buried 4,900 years ago with a golden eye, in a city that had surgeons and animators and no kings. It does not know about the ziggurat built with 5,257 inscribed bricks, and then forgotten for 2,000 years in the desert heat. It does not know about the prophet who stood at a river's edge and articulated heaven and hell and final judgment and the virgin-born Savior, concepts that would 1,000 years later be received as revelation in traditions that have never acknowledged where they first came from. It does not know that the word paradise came from a garden, that the word magic came from Iranian priests, that checkmate came from a Persian king, that the motto of the American Postal Service came from a Greek historian's description of Iranian couriers, that the academy 8 centuries before Oxford was in Khuzestan, that a flame in Yazd has been burning since the Roman Empire still existed, that the man who freed the Jewish people and whom the Hebrew Bible called the Messiah chose as his tomb a small stone house on a quiet plain, with an inscription that said, "Whoever you are, I am Cyrus. Grudge me not my monument." But the monument remains. All of it remains, not only in stone and in archives, but in the faith of billions of people who pray toward an afterlife first described in Iran. In the gardens of the world that all descend, in some deep way, from the first walled garden on a high plain in Fars province. In every game of chess where a king is cornered and a voice says the word that is, at its root, an old Persian word. In the fire that has never been allowed to go out. This is the Iran most people don't know ever existed. A civilization more consequential than almost any that has ever lived, and less known than almost any that has ever been forgotten. But it is still there, still burning, still waiting for the world to look again. If this journey moved you, please like the video, subscribe to History Relived, and leave us a comment. Every word you share helps us tell more of these stories. Stories the world needs to hear. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next adventure.